Decameroticus is a 1972 film directed by Giorgelli, inspired by tales of Boccaccio, Aretino, and Bandello. It is divided into 5 episodes, in which the main theme is that of the cuckolded husband. In the episode The Cucumber Cicilio, the husband becomes big, trusting that the cucumber, peddled by the magician and healer Cicilio as a panacea for everything female, will be the antidote to heal the terrible boredom of his wife. The film is made up of the 5 episodes. First episode, knowing that the husband has replaced the confessor to find out about his betrayal, the wife lets him believe that a friar comes to see her every night. Thus, while the jealous man, instead of sleeping, spent the whole night at the door of the house, the woman can freely receive her lover in her own room, and the next day she even manages to convince her husband of her fidelity. Second episode, Judge Wilfredo to take revenge for the constant prank of Lambertuccio, head of the guard, invite Leonetto, a young man for whom women yearn to take advantage of his wife. But everything is resolved to his detriment, since it is instead Wilfredo's wife who receives both Leonetto and Lambertuccio as lovers. Third episode, while Domitilla's husband sent the boy to his bed so that he can sleep with the maid Nardella, the wife proposes the same substitution to the maid. Thus, Nardella finds herself with her lover, while Domitilla receives her husband's effusion. Fourth episode, Don Casimiro agrees to have his wife treated by Don Cecilio, a seller of plasters, who does nothing but take advantage of the woman under the eyes of her gullible husband. Fifth episode, Messer Sicchio and Messer Zerbino, two merchants forced away from home for a long time, exchange confidences on how not to be betrayed by their wives, so that each managed to make fun of the other. The film, which is said to be inspired by stories by Boccaccio, Aretino, and Bandello, without connection between them, finds a common thread only in the search for licentious and lascivious situation, to which the dialogue of unparalleled vulgarity and crudeness offers a notable contribution, and a quantity of exhibitionistic and sensual scenes now used in works of the genre. Compared to this, even the silliness of the acting and the insipid directing takes second place. The pretentious setting remains. It goes without saying that the whole thing is unspeakable and morally negative. The art of keeping ourselves entertained while quarantined date back many centuries. In 1300, following a plague epidemic that killed more than half the population of his native Florence, Giovanni Boccaccio wrote the Decameron, a binge-worthy collection of tales told by 7 women and 3 men who have fled the city and confined themselves in an empty villa in the countryside. With time on their hand, they decide that every evening each of them will tell a story touching on a pre-established theme, taking one day off a week for chores and of course skipping the Sabbath. They tell 100 stories about knight and ladies, trickster and reprobate, star-crossed lovers, and randy monk and nuns. Each of the 10 storytellers, collectively called the Brigetta, has his or her own personality. There is the beautiful, modest Nephile, the fiery, self-possessed Philomena, thought to be based on a woman. Boccaccio was in love with the witty, forthright, often transgressive Dionio, thought to be a surrogate for Boccaccio himself. It is only Dionio who is allowed to diverge from the themes that govern the stories of any given evening, themes set by the person selected to be that evening's king or queen. Thus, when Nephile is queen, discourse is head of the fortune of such as have painfully acquired some much coveted thing, or having lost have recovered it, and did not take it as an opportunity to tell the raunchiest tale in the Decameron. It's so raunchy. J.M. Rigg, who penned the 1903 English translation featured above, widely considered the most complete of the many public domain attempts, elected not to translate it, leaving the dirtiest bit in Italian. To put it very briefly into English, a beautiful young woman named Alibec, who wishes to become a Christian hermit, goes wandering through the Tunisian desert, trying to get a monk to show her the rope, fearing, however, that they will be ensnared by the devil if they accept her as a pupil, or the monk tell her there is another holy man not far from here, who is much better able to teach thee that of which thou art in quest than I am. This goes on until she comes to a young monk named Rustico, who has no such compunction. He contrived to have them both stripped naked, and when the resurrection of the flesh occur, a few inches below his abdomen, he tells Alibek this is the devil, who will torment him until he is put back in hell. Now I certainly see that those worthy men were telling the truth about how sweet a thing it is to serve God. Alibek tells Rustico a few days later, with thanks to Wine a Reborn's modern translation, for I am sure I can't recall any other thing I have done that has been so delightful or given me so much pleasure as putting the devil back in hell. And for that reason, in my judgment, anyone interested in doing something other than serving God is a bloody fool. And that, Dino explained, is the origin of the love euphemism, putting the devil back into hell. Such is the sort of entertainment one can expect to find in Boccaccio's always lively tales from plague time, which isn't to suggest Boccaccio sucked mention of the plague itself. It is discussed in several of the stories and at greatest length in the introduction, written in the author's own voice. In Florence, despite all that human wisdom and forethought could devise to avoid it, as the cleansing of the city from many impurities by officials appointed for the purpose, the refusal of entrance to all sick folk, and the adoption of many precautions for the preservation of health. Despite also humble supplication addressed so great and often repeated both in public procession and otherwise by the devout. Toward the beginning of the spring of the said year, the doleful effect of the pestilence began to be horribly apparent by symptoms that showed as if miraculous. Whether Boccaccio himself was a witness to the 1349 epidemic in Florence is still debated among scholars. By 1349, he may already have been in Ravenna, but in any event he had certainly seen the horrors of the Black Death, the sudden death, the disappearance of whole families, the endless burials often performed without ceremony. For a dead man was then of no more account than a dead goat would be today. The Brigata would have been escaping exactly this sort of daily horror. Though you might not know it from the lovely series of miniature that adorn an edition of the book held by the National Library of the Netherlands, depicting them from the moment they meet at the church of Santa Maria Novella through the telling of their various stories in village-bound self-isolation. Still, it's no wonder the stories they've heard were so bawdy, and the rules they established for telling them so complicated, trying as they were to take their minds off the uncontrollable devastation nearby. Boccaccio's stories themselves were drawn from many sources, ranging from classical Greek and Latin to local gossip, from the myth of India to those of the Middle East, and would inspire many other stories in turn. Geoffrey Chaucer borrowed heavily from it in the Canterbury Tales, as did Shakespeare and Keats. Its stories have also inspired many visual artists over the centuries. Perhaps most notable is Sandro Botticelli, who in his series The Story of Nastaggio degli Onesti illustrate events from the 8th century of the 5th day. More recently, it has fired the imagination of the novelist Catherine Davis, whose The Silk Road puts a sci-fi twist on the frame story, and the filmmaker Jeff Baena, whose The Little Hours is loosely based on the first and third stories of the third day. All good reading and good watching for our own uncertain, self-isolated times. Giovanni Boccaccio introduces his acclaimed collection of novellas, the Decameron, with a reference to the most terrifying existential crisis of his time, the decimating effect of the plague in the 1348 outbreak known as the Black Death. Boccaccio's book, written between 1348 and 1353, has been acclaimed as an exemplar of vernacular literary prose and a commentary on the pest that swept through Europe that year. A classic of medieval plague literature, it continued to be cited by physicians and epidemiologists to this day for its vivid depiction of a disease that held a city under siege. In the introduction to his book, Boccaccio estimates that more than 1 lakh people, over half of the city's inhabitants, died within the walls of Florence between March 1348 and the following July. He vividly described physical, social, and psychological suffering, writing of people dying in the street, rotting corpses, plague boils, swollen gland known as buboes, some the size of egg, other as large as apples, bruises and the blackening skin that foreshadowed death. Boccaccio's introduction is followed by 10 sections containing short stories. Each of the book's 10 storytellers tell a story a day for 10 days. Derived from Greek, the word Decameron means 10 days and is an allusion to Saint Ambrose Hexameron, a poetic account of the creation story Genesis told over 6 days. The Decameron is a tale of renewal and recreation in defiance of a decimating pandemic. Boccaccio attributes the cause of this terrible plague to either malignant celestial influences or divine punishment for the iniquity of Florentine society. Boccaccio's unfavorable account, lamenting moral degradation and the enormous human suffering, is interrupted by a ray of light in the form of 7 young noble women and 3 young gentlemen, who appear in the church of Santa Maria Novella on a Tuesday morning. They become the storytellers of the Decameron. Collected as a brigade, they exhibit civility, gentility, strength, and a commitment to duty. Boccaccio presents them as decorous and untarnished, having each cared for their loved ones while within the city walls. He gives each a name that suit their personal qualities, choosing monikers from his own and other literary works. They are Pampinia, Philomena, Nephile, Philostrato, Philametta, Eliza, Dionio, Loretta, Emilia, and Panfilo. At the suggestion of the eldest noblewoman, Pampinia, the Brigata leave the terrible pestilence and the devastated plague-ridden city to take refuge in a rural village in the nearby hills. They are not abandoning others, she assured the group, as their relatives have either died or fled.